So does anyone here know who Avram Burg is? So Avram Burg, what once in the Israeli Labor Party were called the princes. It was a generation whose fathers especially were very active and were like the elites of the Labor Party, and these were their children who were expected to become the new leaders. And so Avram Burg, whose father Yosef Burg was a leader in the Labor Party, was a modern Orthodox person, but very progressive in his way of seeing the world, was the chairperson of the Jewish Agency in the 90s. And when Ehud Barak was elected to become prime minister in the year 2000, or 1999, 2000, I'm not sure, he was elected to become the Speaker of the Knesset. And since Avram Burg took a turn, became kind of a bad boy of Israeli politics, took a turn to the left, but he wrote a book on Torah commentaries that in my opinion, is like my favorite Torah commentaries are on the book from Avram Burg that is called Very Close to Me. And in this week's Parsha, he brings this really interesting take. So for those of you who have the plouts in your hands, open to page 513. And the text in Hebrew says, Ve'ele amishpatim asher tasim lifneichem. And the first verse of this week's Parsha, these are the rules that you shall set before them. The English doesn't capture the fact that in Hebrew it actually starts ve'ele, and these are the rules. And all of his commentary is on the word and. And he says, Rashi interprets this vav, this and, as meaning that these rules that the children of Israel are receiving at this moment are a continuation of the 10 affirmations that they received in Parashat Yitro. And Avram Burg says, I'm going to go in the opposite direction. Now, those who know biblical grammar, there is a specific feature of biblical grammar that's called vav haipuch. So if you think of ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But the verb ahavta is in the past. If we were going to do like a literal translation without considering the vav haipuch, the sentence says, and you loved your neighbor as yourself. But the vav haipuch, this particle that usually means and, in this case, what it does is it changes the tense of the verb. And so instead of being in the past, it becomes in the future. And that's how ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha means, and you shall love, and not you loved. The same way after the Shema, ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha. Ve'ahavta means, and you loved your God. But because of the vav, then it's you shall love. So Avram Burg takes this ve'ele amishpatim asher tasim lifneichem to be a vav haipuch and says this is in contradiction, is in opposition to the 10 affirmations that we just read in the previous parsha. And how so? He says the 10 affirmations are the establishment of a legal system or an ethical system top down. God gave us on the top of Mount Sinai, and by miracle, suddenly we had the system of law. But Parashat Mishpatim, it is the very opposite. 53 mitzvot that start to create the legal system, and which the rabbis radically transformed. Each one, if not, maybe not all of them, but several of these instructions, of these mitzvot, the rabbis transformed. The most famous case, it's Ein Tachat Ein, an eye for an eye, that the rabbis, realizing that a society that lives by the principle of an eye for an eye, suddenly everyone will be blind. So they spent pages and pages in the Talmud to argue that an eye for an eye actually means financial restitution, and not the right for the person who was injured then to injure the other one. So Avram Burg says, on the one hand, we had a judicial system that is built one law after the other, after a lot of discussions, after kind of an organic system, in such a way that society can see itself in the laws it produced. And on the other hand, we have this messianic system in which laws were given. There is this very famous passage in the Talmud called Tanudo shel Achnai. The oven of Achnai is maybe the most famous passage in the Talmud, especially in the progressive world. And the story is the rabbis are arguing about how, like a specific oven, and if this oven would absorb impurity or not. So let's say you put something impure inside the oven. When you remove the thing that was impure, is the oven now impure? Or no, the thing was impure, but the oven did not absorb any of the impurity. So they're arguing, and one rabbi has one opinion, and all the other rabbis have a different opinion. So this rabbi who has this opinion, he says, if I'm right, then let the waters of this river show that I'm right. And the river starts flowing backwards. So they say, that's not how you argue in a Beit Midrash, in a rabbinic setting. Then he says, if I'm right, let these trees show that I'm right. And then the trees change place. And the rabbis say, that's not how you prove your points in the Rabbinic Academy. Then he says, if I'm right, let the walls of this Rabbinic Academy show that I'm right. And the walls start inclining and almost putting all of them at risk until one of them says, stop, stop. And then the walls stop. And when the Talmud was written, it says, to this day, the walls are still inclined. And then, very frustrated, the rabbi says, if I'm right, if I'm right on this issue, let God self announce that I'm right. And then a bat kol, a divine voice, comes from heaven and says, don't you know that he's right? He's always right in halachic disputes, in legal disputes. And then the rabbis do the unimaginable. They tell God, Lo b'shamayim hi. You gave us the Torah. So Lo b'shamayim hi means it is not in heaven. She is not in heaven. You gave the Torah to us. Now we get to decide, not you. And then he say, and you also said, Acharei rabim lehatot, follow the decision of the majority. And the majority here thinks that he's wrong. So he's wrong. And the story continues that Eliyahu Navi met God and after this issue. And he was asked, and how was God? Like after the rabbi said that, he was very happy, saying, Nitzchuni banai, my children defeated me. Just like a father who loses to his child on a chess game is prouder of the achievement of his child than he is sad for losing the game. But there is this rabbi, this American rabbi called Gordon Tucker, that because the liberal world loves this idea because it gives humanity the power to contradict what God said, right? Nitzchuni banai. God is happy when we argue, when we know the Jewish tradition enough to say, we don't agree with this part, we want to change. So that's why the progressive world loves this passage so much. But Gordon Tucker, who is a liberal rabbi, he belongs to the Masorti movement, to the conservative movement in the US, he says, we lost the inspiration, right? We shut God down. And now we don't get inspiration anymore. It's all about procedure and the legalistic aspects of everything. So I guess that if we brought that discussion to Avram Burgs, to what he's saying, so on the one hand, we had this very inspired view of a society, divinely inspired, but it comes top down and there's no space for human interaction. It might be a perfect system, but it's one in which we don't have any say. On the other hand, we have this organic system, just like the rabbis did in the story of the Talmud. But sometimes it feels kind of soulless, right? It's so technical in its procedures that sometimes it lacks some inspiration and some dream. And what is the dream of society that we are building through all of these procedures? So may we be able to build a society that both recognizes our voices, and it comes bottom up, but it also reflects our dreams, our deepest dreams and desires for a just and fair society for all.